You're probably scrolling through a dozen NAS listings right now, wondering if any of them will actually fit the mess of media, backups, and maybe a few Docker containers you've been juggling at home or in a small office. I get that feeling. You've got a budget, you don't want to waste money on a box that ends up sitting half empty in the corner, and you're hoping the specs on the page translate into real-world reliability. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's talk about the Synology DiskStation DS1823xs Plus and see if it really lives up to the hype or if you'd be better off looking elsewhere. First off, this isn't a plug-and-play home media server you just drop a couple of drives into and forget about. The DS1823xs Plus is built around a Ryzen V1780B 4-core CPU that can push up to 3.6 GHz, paired with 32 GB of ECC DDR4 memory. In plain English, that means you have a machine that can handle several tasks simultaneously. Think file sharing across a handful of workstations, streaming 4K video to a few TVs, and even running a couple of virtual machines for testing or small-scale services. If your workload is limited to a single user syncing photos from a phone, you're probably over-engineering your setup. But if you've been using an old PC as a makeshift server and find yourself juggling backups, surveillance footage, and a media library, the extra horsepower can actually make a difference in how smooth those operations feel day to day. One of the biggest concerns people have with any NAS is how easy it is to get it up and running. Synology's DiskStation Manager is the operating system that powers all of their devices, and it's pretty much the gold standard for NAS UI. The first time you boot the DS1823xs Plus, you'll be guided through a wizard that asks you to configure storage pools, set up user permissions, and enable services like Quick Connect for remote access. Because the unit ships empty, no drives or memory pre-installed, you'll need to pop in your own HDDs or SSDs and make sure the ECC RAM is seated correctly. That sounds daunting, but the process is straightforward if you follow the step-by-step prompts in DSM, and the community forums are full of screenshots that walk you through everything from RAID configuration to setting up Docker containers. If you're comfortable opening a chassis and snapping in a couple of 2.5-inch drives, you'll be fine. Otherwise, you might want to factor in a bit of extra time or get help from someone who's done it before. Now, let's talk about the practical strengths that actually matter after you've got the hardware installed. The 10 GB port is a standout feature for a small business environment or a power user with a 10 GB switch. It allows you to move terabytes of data across the network in a fraction of the time you'd get with standard gigabit Ethernet. For example, if you're backing up a 10 terabytes video archive nightly, that extra bandwidth can shave off hours of transfer time. The M.2 NVMe slot is another nice touch. You can use a 1 TB SSD as a cache to accelerate read/write speeds for frequently accessed files, which feels noticeable when you're pulling large media files for editing or streaming 4K content to multiple devices at once. On the flip side, the DS1823xs Plus does have some trade-offs you should be aware of. The chassis is fairly large and heavy. It's not something you'll want to tuck under a desk or move around frequently. Power consumption is also higher than a basic 2-bay NAS, which makes sense given the more powerful CPU and the 8 drive bays that can be populated. If you plan to keep all 8 bays filled with spinning disks, you'll see a noticeable increase in your electricity bill compared to a smaller, low-power unit. Another practical limitation is that the unit doesn't come with any drives pre-installed, so you have to budget for those separately. For many people, the cost of high-capacity, enterprise-grade HDDs can push the overall price well above the $2,000 mark, which is something to consider if you're watching every dollar. Who should seriously consider this machine? If you run a small creative studio that needs reliable storage for 4K video projects, a handful of collaborators accessing files over the network, or if you're an IT hobbyist who wants to experiment with virtual machines, Docker, and advanced backup strategies, the DS1823xs Plus gives you a solid platform to do all of that without hitting a wall quickly. The ECC memory adds a layer of data integrity that's valuable when you can't afford silent corruption on large databases or critical backups. Likewise, if you already have a 10 GB network setup, this NAS will take full advantage of it and make your workflow feel a lot more fluid. Conversely, if you're a home user whose main goal is to stream a personal movie library to a couple of TVs and back up a few laptops, you'll likely be better off with a more modest Synology model that has fewer bays and a less aggressive